The blind date was supposed to be harmless. Just dinner. Just polite conversation. But when she asked about his past, the questions didn't stop. They dug. They pried. They turned the worst day of his life into small talk over candles and wine. He paid the bill, stood up, and decided this was why he never tried anymore. Then, as he turned toward the door, a calm voice came from the next table. "If you're free, sit here." He didn't know her. He didn't owe her anything. But for the first time in years, someone wasn't asking him to explain his pain. The alarm never had a chance to ring. Mark was already awake at 5:47 a.m., staring at the ceiling of his bedroom in their small house on Maple Street. The numbers on the clock glowed green in the dark. 3 minutes until the alarm. He reached over and turned it off before it could beep. The house was quiet in the way only early mornings could be, not peaceful, just empty. He stood, pulled on the same jeans from yesterday, and walked down the hallway. Past the bathroom with its leaking faucet he kept meaning to fix. Past the framed photos he'd stopped really seeing months ago. Into Ethan's room. His son was still asleep, curled on his side with one hand tucked under his pillow. 6 years old. Small for his age. The nightlight, shaped like a rocket ship, cast soft blue shadows across the wall. Mark stood there for a moment, just watching him breathe. Then he went downstairs. The kitchen was the same as it always was, clean enough, functional, missing the small touches that used to make it feel like a home. He pulled out the griddle, cracked 2 eggs, dropped bread in the toaster. The routine was muscle memory now. He didn't have to think about it. By 6:15, he heard the creak of floorboards upstairs. Ethan appeared in the doorway a few minutes later, his hair sticking up on one side, wearing pajamas with dinosaurs on them. He climbed onto his chair at the kitchen table without a word, still half asleep. Mark set the plate in front of him. Scrambled eggs, toast with butter, cut diagonally. Orange juice in the blue cup. "Morning, bud." "Morning," Ethan mumbled. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Mark had learned not to force conversation in the mornings. Ethan needed time to wake up, just like he did. It was Ethan who finally spoke, poking at his eggs with his fork. "Are you going somewhere tonight?" Mark's hand paused halfway to his coffee mug. "Yeah. Just meeting someone for dinner. A friend of Uncle Tom's." Ethan looked up at him, his face unreadable in the way kids' faces sometimes were, like they understood more than they could say. "Is it a girl?" Mark hesitated. Lying felt wrong, but so did the truth. "Yeah," he said quietly. Ethan nodded, then went back to his eggs. He didn't ask anything else. Mark felt something tighten in his chest. He wanted to say something, to explain, to reassure, but he didn't know what words would help. So he just reached across the table and ruffled Ethan's hair. "Mrs. Patterson's coming at 6, he said. "I'll be back before bedtime." "Okay." They finished breakfast. Mark helped Ethan get dressed, packed his lunch, drove him to school. He watched in the rearview mirror as Ethan walked through the gates, backpack bouncing against his shoulders, and felt the same twist of worry he felt every morning. Was he doing this right? Any of it? At work, he went through the motions. Answered emails, attended a meeting. Nodded when his coworker asked if he was ready for tonight. "Tom's been hyping this one up," she said with a grin. "Says she's perfect for you." Mark forced a smile. "We'll see." But inside, he already knew. He didn't want to go. Didn't want to sit across from a stranger and try to be charming. Didn't want to explain his life in neat little sentences that never captured the weight of it. He just wanted to go home, put Ethan to bed, and exist without anyone asking him to be more than he was. But Tom had been persistent, and Mark had run out of excuses. So when 6 o'clock came, he put on a clean shirt, kissed Ethan on the forehead, and drove to Oak and Candle on the east side of Lakeview City, telling himself it was just one night, just dinner. How bad could it be? Oak and Candle was the kind of restaurant Mark never went to anymore. Soft lighting, cloth napkins, a menu with prices that made him wince. Tom had made the reservation, insisted on the place, said it would set the right tone. Mark walked in at 7 p.m. exactly and saw her immediately. Rachel. That was her name. Tom had shown him a photo, blonde, smiling, worked in marketing. She was already seated at a table near the window, checking her phone. She looked up when he approached, and her smile was polite. Professional. Mark? Yeah. Hi. He slid into the chair across from her, suddenly aware of how stiff he felt, how out of place. Tom's told me a lot about you, she said, setting her phone down. It's nice to finally meet. You too. The waiter came. They ordered drinks. The first 10 minutes were fine surface-level pleasantries about work, the weather, how long they'd both lived in Lakeview City. Rachel was easy to talk to, articulate, confident. But then, the questions started. So, Tom mentioned you have a son? Mark nodded. Ethan. He's 6. That's a sweet age. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes, curiosity, maybe, or calculation. Is it just the two of you? There it was. The question he'd been waiting for. Yeah, he said quietly. Tom said you're widowed. I'm so sorry. Mark's grip tightened on his water glass. Thanks. How long has it been? 2 years. She nodded slowly, like she was processing. That must be so hard. Raising a child alone. We manage. Do you mind if I ask what happened? His jaw tightened. He should have expected this, should have prepared. But somehow, sitting here in this restaurant with candles flickering between them, the question felt invasive in a way he hadn't anticipated. Car accident, he said, the words flat and automatic. Rachel's face softened with sympathy. Oh my God. I wasn't there. And Ethan? He wasn't there either. She leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle. That must haunt you. Mark felt something cold settle in his stomach. She wasn't trying to be cruel. He knew that. She probably thought she was being compassionate, interested, empathetic. But all he could feel was the way she was watching him, like he was a tragedy she could understand if she just asked the right questions. It was a long time ago, he said, keeping his voice even. Still. Losing someone like that? I can't imagine. Does Ethan remember her? Some. That must make it harder. Trying to keep her memory alive for him while also moving forward yourself. Mark set down his glass. His hands felt cold. Rachel, he said quietly. Can we talk about something else? Of course. She sat back, looking faintly embarrassed. I didn't mean to pry. Tom made it sound like you were ready to start dating again, and I wanted to understand where you were at. Emotionally, I mean. I appreciate that, Mark said. But I don't really need to be understood. The words came out sharper than he intended. Rachel blinked, her expression shifting from apologetic to guarded. I wasn't trying to psychoanalyze you, she said, her tone cooler now. I was just trying to get to know you. I know, but the damage was done. The rest of the dinner limped along awkward, stilted, punctuated by long silences neither of them tried to fill. When the check came, Mark didn't wait for her to offer. He pulled out his wallet, paid in cash, and stood. I should get going, he said. Mrs. Patterson's waiting. Rachel nodded, not meeting his eyes. It was nice meeting you. You too. He walked out of the restaurant and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the cool night air. His chest felt tight, not from anger, just exhaustion. This was why he didn't do this. Why he'd told Tom no a dozen times before finally giving in. Because every time he tried to move forward, someone wanted to turn his grief into a conversation. He was about to head to his car when he heard it. A voice, calm, quiet, coming from somewhere behind him. If you're free, sit here. Mark turned. There was a small patio behind the restaurant, just 3 tables, separated from the main dining area by a low wooden fence. He hadn't noticed it when he walked in. At the middle table sat a woman, alone. She wasn't looking at him the way Rachel had, with curiosity or pity or expectation. She was just looking. Her expression was neutral, almost unreadable. She gestured to the chair across from her. "No pressure, but you looked like you could use a reset." Mark hesitated. He should leave, should go home. Ethan was waiting. Mrs. Patterson had to be relieved by 9, but something in the woman's voice stopped him. She wasn't asking him to explain anything, wasn't digging, wasn't trying to fix him or understand him or turn him into a project. She was just offering a chair. He walked over slowly, still not entirely sure why, and sat down. "Thanks," he said. She nodded. "Rough night?" Something like that. She didn't push. Didn't ask follow-up questions. Just took a sip of her wine and looked out at the street. For a long moment, they sat in silence. It should have been awkward. Mark kept waiting for the discomfort to settle in, for the pressure to say something clever or interesting. But it didn't come. The silence felt easy. Finally, she spoke. "I'm Claire." "Mark. Nice to meet you, Mark." "You too." Another stretch of quiet. Then Claire glanced at him, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly. "You don't have to stay. I just thought you looked like you were about to either scream or get in your car and drive into the ocean." Mark let out a short, surprised laugh. "That obvious?" "Little bit." He rubbed the back of his neck, feeling some of the tension ease. "It was a blind date. First one in a while." "Ah." Claire nodded knowingly. "Those are the worst. You've had bad ones?" "Everyone's had bad ones." She tilted her head. "What made this one so bad?" Mark paused. He could deflect, could give a vague answer. But something about the way she asked, casual, not probing, made him tell the truth. "She wanted to know about my dead wife." Claire's expression didn't change. No gasp, no widening eyes, no rush of sympathy. She just nodded. "Yeah. That'll do it." Mark stared at her, caught off guard by the simplicity of her response. "Most people don't know what to say to that," he said quietly. "Most people don't." Claire took another sip of wine. "But I'm guessing you're tired of people trying to say the right thing." "Yeah. Then I won't." And she didn't. They sat there, two strangers on a patio, not filling the silence with false comfort or empty reassurances. Just existing in the same space. After a while, Claire spoke again. "Do you have to leave soon?" Mark glanced at his watch. 7:52. "Not yet." "Good." She gestured to the menu on the table. "Because their dessert menu is incredible, and I hate eating dessert alone." Mark felt something shift in his chest, something small, but real. "Okay," he said. They ordered chocolate cake. Shared it between them. Talked about nothing important: traffic in Lakeview City, the weird weather lately, whether the restaurant's decor was trying too hard. Claire didn't ask about his past, didn't ask about Ethan, didn't ask what he did for work or where he lived or what he wanted out of life. She just talked and listened and made him feel like he didn't have to be anything other than a guy eating cake on a Thursday night. When he finally stood to leave, she didn't ask for his number, didn't suggest they do this again. She just said, "Thanks for sitting." Mark looked at her for a moment. This stranger who'd given him an hour of peace without asking for anything in return. "Thanks," he said quietly, "for not asking." Claire's smile was small, but genuine. "Anytime." He walked to his car, got in, and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. For the first time in 2 years, a conversation with a woman hadn't left him feeling hollow. Mark didn't expect to see Claire again. That night on the patio had felt like a moment out of time, a brief, accidental kindness that didn't need a follow-up. He went home, relieved Mrs. Patterson, checked on Ethan, and tried not to think about it. But 3 days later, he saw her at the grocery store. He was in the cereal aisle, staring blankly at rows of boxes while Ethan debated between two brands with cartoon characters on them. When he heard a familiar voice, "The one on the left has more sugar." Mark turned. Claire was standing a few feet away, holding a basket with vegetables and a carton of milk. She wore jeans and a gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Hi," he said, surprised. "Hi." She smiled at Ethan. "Smart kid. Always go with more sugar." Ethan looked up at her, then at Mark, then back at her. "Do you know my dad?" "We've met," Claire said, simply. "Oh." Ethan seemed to accept this without question and went back to studying the cereal boxes. Claire glanced at Mark. "How've you been?" "Good." "You?" "Same." It was such a normal exchange, the kind neighbors might have, or acquaintances who ran into each other occasionally. But there was something about the ease of it that made Mark's shoulders relax. They talked for a few minutes. Nothing deep. She mentioned she'd just moved to the neighborhood a few months ago, lived in an apartment complex near the park. He mentioned he worked in IT for a mid-sized firm downtown. Ethan, sensing the conversation was boring, tugged on Mark's sleeve. "Dad, can we get this one?" "Sure, bud." Claire stepped back. "I'll let you guys finish shopping. Good to see you, Mark." "You too." She walked away, disappearing around the corner toward the dairy section. Ethan looked up at him. "Who was that?" "Just someone I met," Mark said. "She's nice." "Yeah." "She is." They saw her again the following week at the park. Mark had taken Ethan after school, something they did once or twice a week when the weather was decent. Ethan liked the swings, and Mark liked the excuse to sit on a bench and not think about work. Claire was sitting on the opposite end of the park, reading a book. Ethan spotted her first. "Dad, there's that lady again." Mark looked up. "So there is. Can I say hi?" "Sure. Just don't bother her if she's busy." Ethan ran over, his small legs carrying him across the grass. Mark watched as Claire looked up, smiled, and said something that made Ethan laugh. A few minutes later, Ethan came running back. "She said she likes the swings too," he announced, breathless. "Did she?" "Yeah. And she said her favorite color is green. Mine's blue." Mark smiled, despite himself. "That's good, bud." Ethan ran off to the swings again, and Mark glanced over at Claire. She met his eyes across the park and gave a small wave. He waved back. It became a pattern after that, not intentional, just the kind of thing that happened when two people lived in the same neighborhood and went to the same places. They'd see each other at the coffee shop on Saturday mornings, at the library when Mark took Ethan to pick out books, in line at the post office. Each time, they'd exchange a few words. Nothing heavy, nothing complicated. And each time, Mark noticed the same thing. Claire never pushed. She never asked about his life beyond what he offered. Never tried to get closer than he was comfortable with. Never looked at him like he was broken or needed saving. She just treated him like a person. One afternoon, after another chance encounter at the farmer's market, Mark found himself thinking about her on the drive home. Not in a romantic way, not exactly. More like noticing. The way someone might notice when a room felt warmer, or when background noise stopped being grating. Claire made things feel lighter. He wasn't sure what to do with that realization, so he did what he always did when he didn't know what to feel. He focused on Ethan, on work, on the daily rhythm of staying afloat, and he told himself it didn't mean anything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Claire appeared at the community health clinic. Mark had brought Ethan in for a routine checkup, nothing serious, just the 6-year wellness visit he'd been putting off for 2 months. They were sitting in the waiting room, Ethan flipping through a picture book, when the door opened and Claire walked in. She had a folder in her hands and was talking to the receptionist, but when she turned and saw Mark, she paused. "Hey," she said, surprised. She glanced at Ethan, then back at Mark. "Everything okay? Just a checkup." "Ah." She hesitated, then said, "I volunteer here." Patient advocacy program. That's good of you. Claire shrugged. Beats, sitting at home. Ethan looked up from his book. Hi, Claire. Hi, Ethan. She smiled at him. How's school? Good. We're learning about space. Space is cool. I know. Ethan's face lit up. Did you know Saturn has 82 moons? I did not know that, Claire said seriously. That's a lot of moons. Mark watched them talk, something shifting in his chest. Claire didn't talk down to Ethan, didn't use that overly sweet voice some adults used with kids. She just talked to him, like he mattered. When Ethan's name was called, Claire gave a small wave. Good luck with the checkup. Thanks. As they walked toward the exam room, Ethan glanced back at her, then up at Mark. I like her, he said simply. Mark's throat tightened. Yeah, me too. A week later, Claire showed up at the park again. This time, Ethan ran over immediately, like they were old friends. Claire, want to see how high I can swing? Absolutely. Mark stayed on the bench, watching as Ethan showed off, pumping his legs to go higher and higher while Claire stood nearby, hands in her pockets, offering the occasional word of encouragement. When Ethan finally tired himself out, he ran back to Mark, cheeks flushed. Did you see? I saw. You went really high. Claire saw too. I know. Claire walked over, her expression calm. He's got good form. Mark smiled. He's been practicing. They stood there for a moment, the silence comfortable. Then Claire said, I'm heading to the coffee shop on 4th. If you guys want to join, I'm buying. Mark hesitated. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm offering. Ethan tugged on his sleeve. Can we, Dad? Please? Mark looked at his son's hopeful face, then at Claire's steady gaze. Okay, he said quietly. They walked to the coffee shop together, Ethan chattering between them about school and space and whether penguins had knees. Claire listened patiently, asking questions that made Ethan think, laughing at his jokes. Inside, they ordered drinks, coffee for Mark and Claire, hot chocolate for Ethan. They sat at a corner table, and for an hour, they just existed. No interrogation, no prying, no expectations. Just 3 people sharing space. When they finally left, Ethan hugged Claire goodbye without being prompted. She looked surprised but hugged him back gently. See you around, Ethan. See you. As they walked to the car, Ethan slipped his hand into Mark's. She's really nice, Dad. Yeah, Mark said softly. She is. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, Mark sat on the couch and stared at his phone. He had Claire's number now. She'd given it to him at the coffee shop, casually, saying, in case Ethan wants a rematch on space trivia. He hadn't texted her yet, wasn't sure what he'd say. But for the first time in 2 years, he felt something other than exhaustion when he thought about letting someone in. It scared him. It was raining the night, Claire told him. They'd been texting for a few weeks. By then, nothing intense, just occasional messages. She'd send a photo of something funny she saw. He'd ask if she wanted to grab coffee. Slowly, carefully, they were building something. Mark wasn't sure what to call it. That night, she'd invited him over to her apartment. He almost said no, almost made an excuse, but he didn't. Claire's apartment was small but warm. Books on shelves, plants by the window, a worn couch that looked like it had been loved for years. She made tea, and they sat across from each other, rain drumming against the glass. They talked about small things at first. Work, Ethan's obsession with astronauts, the weather. Then Claire said, Can I ask you something? Mark tensed, bracing himself. Yeah, why did you sit down that night? At the restaurant. He considered lying, giving a safe answer. Instead, he said, Because you didn't want anything from me. Claire nodded slowly. I get that. Do you? She looked at him for a long moment, then set down her mug. I lost someone too, she said quietly. 4 years ago. His name was David. Brain cancer. Took 11 months from diagnosis to... She trailed off, her jaw tight. Everyone wanted to talk about it. Wanted to know how I was coping. Wanted me to let them in so they could help. Mark's chest ached. I didn't want help, Claire continued. I just wanted to be left alone. But people don't know how to do that. They think silence is cruelty. It's not, Mark said. No, it's not. They sat in the quiet for a while, the rain filling the space between them. Finally, Claire spoke again. I'm not looking to fix you, Mark, and I don't need you to fix me. But I also can't do undefined. I can't be someone's maybe. Mark met her eyes. What do you want? Honestly, she exhaled. I don't know. But I know I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of protecting myself so much that I don't let anyone close, and I'm tired of people who say they want to try but don't actually show up. I'm scared, Mark admitted, of losing someone again, of Ethan losing someone. I know. Claire's voice was soft but firm. And I can't promise that won't happen. But I can promise I won't ask you to pretend you're not scared. I won't ask you to be ready before you are. Mark felt something crack open inside him, something that had been sealed shut for 2 years. I don't know if I can do this, he said. Then don't, Claire said simply. But if you want to try, I'm here. And if you don't, that's okay too. Just don't string me along while you decide. She wasn't angry, wasn't pleading. She was just honest. And that honesty cut deeper than any demand could have. Mark left that night without giving her an answer. He drove home through the rain, his mind spinning, and when he got to his empty house, he sat in the driveway for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. He thought about Ethan, about what it would mean to let someone into their life. He thought about Claire, about how easy it felt to be around her, and how terrifying that ease was. And he thought about himself, about whether he was protecting his son or just hiding. He didn't have an answer yet, but he knew he couldn't keep living in the space between wanting and being too afraid to reach. The next 2 weeks were a slow erosion. Mark stopped texting as much. When Claire messaged him, he'd respond hours later, his answers short and non-committal. He told himself he was being careful, responsible. He told himself he was protecting Ethan. But late at night, when the house was quiet and he couldn't sleep, he knew the truth. He was terrified. Ethan noticed. Are we going to see Claire this weekend? He asked one morning over cereal. Not this weekend, bud. Why not? Just busy. Ethan frowned but didn't push. The following week, the same question. Can we invite Claire to the park? Maybe another time. You always say that. Mark's jaw tightened. Ethan, drop it. His son went quiet, hurt flickering across his face. Mark felt like a monster. At work, he was distracted. At home, he was short-tempered. He kept his phone face down on the counter, avoiding Claire's messages until they slowed, then stopped. He knew what he was doing. Knew he was pulling away, but he couldn't stop, because every time he thought about letting Claire in, really in, he saw the same thing. Ethan's face the day they'd told him his mother wasn't coming home. He couldn't do that to his son again. One night, Mark's phone rang. It was Claire. He stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the answer button. He let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. Claire, I'm not going to chase you, Mark, but I need to know if this is you needing space or you walking away. Because I can give you space. I can't do limbo. Mark read the message 3 times. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He started typing a response, then deleted it. Started again. Deleted again. Finally, he set the phone down and walked away. Ethan was in the living room, watching a show. Mark sat down next to him, and his son immediately leaned into his side, small and warm. I love you, bud, Mark said quietly. I love you too, Dad. Mark wrapped an arm around him and told himself this was enough. It had to be enough. It happened on a Sunday. Mark was in the kitchen, on the phone with his brother Tom. who was asking again if he'd heard from Claire. "You're an idiot, you know that?" Tom said bluntly. "She's good for you. Anyone can see that." "It's not that simple," Mark said, his voice low. "Why not?" "Because it's not just about me. I have to think about Ethan. Ethan likes her. That's the problem." Mark rubbed his temples. "What happens if it doesn't work out? What happens if she leaves? He's already lost his mother. I can't put him through that again. So your plan is to never let anyone in? Ever? I don't know, Tom. I'm just trying to do the right thing. The right thing is not hiding for the rest of your life." Mark didn't respond. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway. His son's face was pale. "Ethan." But Ethan turned and walked away, his small footsteps disappearing down the hall. Mark ended the call and followed him. Ethan was in his room, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. "Bud, how much of that did you hear?" Ethan didn't answer. Mark knelt down in front of him. "Ethan, talk to me." His son's voice was small. "Is it my fault you don't see Claire anymore?" Mark's heart cracked. No, Bud. It's not. "You said you can't put me through it again," Ethan said, his eyes welling with tears. "You said I already lost Mom, so it's because of me." "Ethan, no. I don't want you to be sad because of me." The tears spilled over now, running down his cheeks. "I'm used to it. I'm used to people leaving. You don't have to be alone because of me." The words hit Mark like a physical blow. "Ethan, I'm sorry," his son whispered. "I'm sorry I make things hard." Mark pulled him into his arms, holding him so tightly it hurt. "You don't make things hard," he said, his voice breaking. "You make everything better. You're the only thing that kept me going. Do you understand? You're everything." Ethan sobbed into his shoulder, and Mark felt his own tears fall. "I'm the one who's sorry," Mark whispered. "I'm so sorry, Bud. I've been scared. I've been so scared of losing someone again that I forgot. I forgot that you need more than just me trying to keep us safe. You need to see me live, not just survive." Ethan clung to him, and they stayed like that for a long time, the weight of 2 years of grief finally breaking open between them. When Ethan finally pulled back, his face was red and blotchy, but his voice was steady. "I liked Claire," he said quietly. "She was nice to us." "I know. Do you like her?" Mark swallowed hard. "Yeah, I do." "Then why did you stop talking to her?" "Because I was scared." Ethan frowned. "Of what?" "Of her leaving. Of you getting hurt." His son thought about that for a moment, then said, "But what if she doesn't leave?" Mark didn't have an answer. Ethan wiped his eyes. "Mom left, but she didn't want to. Right?" "Right. And you didn't leave me, even when you were sad. I would never leave you. So maybe—" Ethan hesitated. "Maybe Claire won't either. If we don't push her away, out of the mouths of children." Mark let out a shaky breath and pulled his son close again. "You're smarter than me, you know that?" Ethan sniffled. "I know." Mark smiled despite everything. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, Mark sat on the couch and pulled out his phone. He opened his messages with Claire. Her last text was still there, unanswered. He typed slowly, carefully. "Mark, I'm sorry. I got scared. I pulled away because I thought I was protecting Ethan, but I was really just protecting myself. I don't know if I can promise I won't be scared again, but I want to try. If you'll let me." He hit send before he could overthink it. Then he set the phone down and waited. Claire didn't respond that night, or the next morning. Mark checked his phone obsessively between meetings at work, at red lights, while making Ethan breakfast. But the message sat there, unread, and with each passing hour, the knot in his stomach tightened. He'd blown it. By the second day, he'd almost convinced himself to stop hoping. Then, at 3:17 p.m., his phone buzzed. "Claire, can we meet?" His heart jumped. "Mark, when?" Claire. Tonight, 7? Same place we first met. Mark. I'll be there. Mark spent the rest of the afternoon in a fog. He picked Ethan up from school, made dinner, tried to focus on his son's stories about art class, but his mind kept drifting. At 6:30, Mrs. Patterson arrived. "You look nervous," she said with a knowing smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Only completely." She shooed him toward the door. "Go. We'll be fine." Mark kissed Ethan on the head. "Be good for Mrs. Patterson." "I will." Ethan looked up at him, his expression serious. "Are you going to see Claire?" "Yeah. Tell her I said hi." Mark's throat tightened. "I will." He drove to Oak and Candle with his hands gripping the wheel too tightly, his mind running through every possible version of how this could go. She could tell him it was too late, that she'd moved on, that she couldn't trust someone who'd already pulled away once. She'd be right to. When he arrived, Claire was already there, sitting at the same patio table where they'd first talked. She looked up as he approached, her expression unreadable. "Hi," he said. He sat down across from her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Claire said, "Why now?" "What? Why did you text me now? After 2 weeks of silence?" Mark took a breath. "Because my son told me I was being an idiot." Claire's eyebrow lifted slightly. "Did he?" "Not in those words. But yeah." Mark looked down at his hands. "He overheard me talking to my brother. Heard me say I was worried about him getting hurt if you left. And he told me he was used to people leaving. That I didn't have to be alone because of him." Claire's expression softened. "He's 6, Mark continued, his voice thick. "And he's already resigned to loss. And I realized I did that to him, by being so scared of grief that I taught him to expect it." "Mark, I'm not good at this," he said quickly. "I don't know how to let people in without catastrophizing. I don't know how to hope without waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I want to try, not because I'm suddenly not scared, but because staying scared is worse." Claire was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I can't be your maybe, Mark." "I meant that, I know, and I can't fix you. I won't try. I don't need you to, but I also can't promise this will work," Claire said, her voice steady. "I can't promise I won't hurt you, or that you won't hurt me. I can't promise forever." "I'm not asking for forever," Mark said. "I'm just asking for now. For the chance to see where this goes without running away the first time it gets hard." Claire studied him, her eyes searching his face. "Ethan really said all that? He really did." She smiled faintly. "Smart kid. Too smart." Claire leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. "If we do this, I need honesty. Not just the easy stuff. If you're scared, you tell me. If you need space, you tell me. Don't just disappear. Okay, and I need you to let Ethan be part of this. Not immediately, not all at once, but I'm not interested in being a secret you keep from your son. You won't be. Good." She paused. "And I need you to know that I'm scared too. I've done this before, let someone in, built a life with them, and then watched them die. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to do that again. So if you're looking for someone who's fearless, that's not me." Mark reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't need fearless," he said quietly. "I just need honest." Claire looked at their joined hands, then back at him. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay? Okay. We can try." Mark felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me yet." Claire smiled, but there was warmth in it. "You might regret this." "I doubt it." They sat there for a while, talking about nothing important, just easing back into each other's presence. And when Mark finally left, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. He drove home, relieved Mrs. Patterson, and found Ethan already asleep. He stood in his son's doorway for a moment, watching him breathe, and felt a surge of gratitude so intense it nearly knocked him over. "Thanks, Bud," he whispered. Ethan didn't stir. Mark closed the door gently and went to bed, and for the first time in 2 years he fell asleep without dread sitting on his chest. 3 weeks later, Mark invited Claire over for dinner. Not at a restaurant, not on neutral ground. At home, he told Ethan the day before, bracing himself for questions. Instead, Ethan just said, "Can I help cook? You want to help?" "Yeah. I want her to like it." Mark smiled. "I think she'll like it no matter what, Bud." They spent the afternoon preparing. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti, garlic bread, a salad Ethan assembled with intense focus. The house smelled warm and lived in, and when the doorbell rang at 6 p.m., Ethan ran to answer it before Mark could stop him. "Claire." "Hey, Ethan." She smiled, holding a small bag. "I brought brownies. Store-bought, but still good. I love brownies." "Me too." Mark appeared behind Ethan, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hi." Claire met his eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Relief. "Come in," Mark said. Dinner was normal, not perfect. Ethan spilled his juice halfway through. The garlic bread was slightly burned. Mark stumbled over his words more than once, but it was normal, and normal felt like a gift. Afterward, they sat on the couch while Ethan showed Claire his collection of space books, chattering excitedly about black holes and Mars rovers. Claire listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Ethan think, laughing at his jokes. Mark watched them. Something warm, settling in his chest. Eventually, Ethan yawned. "Bedtime, Bud," Mark said. "Do I have to?" "Yeah." Ethan sighed dramatically, then looked at Claire. "Will you come back?" Claire glanced at Mark, then back at Ethan. "If your dad says it's okay, I'd like that." "It's okay," Ethan said quickly, then looked at Mark. Mark smiled. "Right." Ethan hugged Claire goodnight, then trudged upstairs. When he was gone, Claire turned to Mark. "He's wonderful," she said softly. "He is." They sat in the quiet for a moment, the house settling around them. Then Claire said, "This is going to be messy, you know." "I know. We're both going to be scared. We're both going to mess up." "I know, and it might not work out." Mark looked at her. "But it might." Claire smiled. "Yeah, it might." She reached for his hand, and he took it. They didn't kiss. Didn't make grand declarations. They just sat there. Two people who'd been broken and were trying carefully, imperfectly to be whole again. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a cure. But it was real. And for the first time in 2 years, Mark felt like he was living instead of just surviving. From upstairs, Ethan called out, "Dad?" "Yeah, Bud? Can Claire read me a story sometime?" Mark looked at Claire, who was smiling. "Maybe," he called back. "We'll see." "Okay." "Good night." Claire squeezed his hand. "We'll see, huh?" "One step at a time," Mark said. "I can do one step at a time." "Me too." They sat together in the dim light of the living room, not certain of what came next, but willing to find out. And that was enough.